started just yet. Right.
Right, it hasn't started just yet.
I'll call this meeting of the State Board of Elections to order. Pending the election of a new secretary, I will call the roll. Vice Chair O'Bannon.
Here.
Ms. Chang. Delegate Merricks.
Here.
Ms. Alvis Long. Here. And I'm present. We do have a quorum. Before we proceed, I'd like to welcome our newest member, Georgia Alvis Long, to her first board meeting. She comes to the board with valuable on-the-ground experience in elections. She's served as secretary of the Augusta County Electoral Board for 3 years and previously was a precinct chief and officer of election. Ms. Alvis Long, we look forward to working with you. At the conclusion of today's meeting, the board will go into closed session to receive the advice of counsel. Before going into closed session, the board will receive public comment on items not on today's agenda. Without objection, members of the public will be heard for 3 minutes and are welcome to submit statements for the record. Before we proceed on the agenda items, the board needs to elect a secretary to replace now Judge Cruz. The floor is open for nominations.
Mr. Chairman,
Dr. O'Bannon,
I have a motion.
gentleman will state it.
Thank you, sir. I move that the board elect our newest member, Georgia Alvis Long, to be a secretary in good faith in giving her things to do. And I would like to praise the board that we are all now safer since she's a cardiac nurse and teaches CPR. So that's my motion.
My mind is more at ease also. Are there any further nominations? If not, I will call the roll. Vice Chair O'Bannon. Ms. Chang. Delegate Merricks. Ms. Alvis Long. And I vote aye. Congratulations. All right. The first order of business is approval of the minutes from our meeting of April 13, 2022. Do the members have any corrections to the minutes as presented? I have a very, very small one on line 193. The spelling of Latham is incorrect, and Mr. Latham is crucial to our activities here. So it should be Latham. Other than that, Secretary Alvis Long, will you call the roll?
Chairman Brink,
Aye.
Vice Chair O'Bannon, Ms. Chang, Delegate Merricks, and then myself is A. Yes. Aye.
All right, motion passes 5-0. Our next item of business is the Commissioner's
Me
report.
last.
Commissioner Beals?
Good afternoon. I just wanted to update you on a couple of the activities of the board over the last month. On May 17th, we held a continuity of operations meeting or COOP meeting with our law enforcement and state agency partners. This is something that we do prior to each election, each primary and each general election. And it's an opportunity to update our partners and then share information about any scheduled projects that might occur on election day, make sure that we're all coordinated before election day. Now, they also are on site and present with us on election day, and we are monitoring activities and information on that day as well. But we're thankful for them that they consider it a priority and that they consider elections critical infrastructure and make it a priority to be with us. On the policy side, since our last State Board of Elections meeting, ELECT has made some progress on implementing the legislative changes that have come our way. This includes some scoping discussions about some of the topics that we have to work on, including same-day registration, pre-registration of 16-year-olds, and absentee reporting by precinct. Those are all things that will need to be implemented by July 1. The policy team is also currently reworking the GREV handbook, and that's going to be released as a tool for the field on July 1st, and that will also include updated legislative changes. Early voting began on May 6th for the June 21st primary. As you know, only 5 of our 11 congressional districts are having primaries on June 21st. 4 of those are Republican primaries, so that's in the 2nd Congressional District, the 3rd Congressional District, the 6th Congressional District, and the 7th Congressional District. And then there is one that's having a Democratic primary, and that's the 8th Congressional District. So there is not one congressional district in Virginia that's having a dual primary. When you go to walk in to vote, you are only going to be offered the ballot of one party. That's what's available to voters. Sometimes that causes a little bit of confusion, and there are some alternative nominating events that are held by the parties. A couple of them occurred this past weekend, but we don't have anything to do with that. They just make sure that they provide us their paperwork listing their nominee to us by June 21st. I wanted to provide you just some numbers on our early voting to give you a sense of what we're seeing in the field. As of last night at 6 p.m., 2,972 Virginians had voted early in person in the Virginia primary. In addition, our registrars had received back absentee ballots from 11,490 voters. That's out of roughly 48,000 that were mailed out. So that 11,000 number is not a counted number. A lot of those maybe have not even been processed yet. That's just saying this is what registrars received in their mailbox back from voters. So those are some latest numbers for you. There's a couple upcoming deadlines I wanted to make everyone aware of as well. The last day to register to vote in the primary is this coming Tuesday, May 31st. June 10th is the last day to request an absentee ballot by mail. And then June 18th is a Saturday. That's the last day to vote early in person. We offer early voting for those 2 Saturdays prior to the election, but then we do not have voting on that Sunday or Monday in order to give registrars an opportunity to prepare for Election Day on the 21st. So with that, that's the conclusion of my report.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Beals. I have a couple of updates that I wanted to give the board. You'll recall that at the April meeting, the board directed me to write to the chairs of the Democratic Party of Virginia and the Republican Party of Virginia in regard to local political parties' recommendations for appointments to local electoral boards. I sent this letter off at the end of April. I will forward a copy of it to be included in the minutes. The board also directed me to write to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Virginia, asking for his assistance in making the local circuit courts aware of the importance of those appointments. That letter is being drafted and will be sent out in the next few days. Other than that, I believe, do the members have any questions for the commissioner? If not, we will proceed on to the next item on our agenda, which is Bedford County's request for waiver to administer a split precinct. Mr. Davenport?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I apologize. I think I just shouted into the mic at you. Like you said, this afternoon, I'm presenting one split precinct waiver request. This is for Bedford County, and it would encompass 3 different splits that they're requesting. As background, the Code of Virginia authorizes the State Board of Elections to grant a waiver to administer a split precinct if the governing body of a locality is unable to establish a precinct with the minimum number of registered voters without splitting the precinct. This is a result of Senate Bill 740, which was passed during the 2020 General Assembly session. Waivers must be requested by the governing body of a locality. This is often accomplished by a formal resolution passed by the governing body or by documenting the approval to request a waiver in the governing body's signed meeting minutes. These documents are submitted to elect by the general registrar of the locality, along with our split precinct waiver form, which is the State Board of Election Form 307. A locality may only administer a split precinct for elections held in the year the waiver is granted, and therefore a new waiver is required each calendar year. In this case, like I said, there are 3 split precincts that are being requested, and I'm just going to very briefly walk you through each one. We do have a unanimous vote from the local Board of Supervisors that approved the 3 splits on their end. The first split that is being requested would be in Precinct 104 of Bedford County. That's Stewartsville Rescue Squad. This split would only affect 2 individuals if enacted. The next requested split is Bedford County Precinct 303. That's Bethesda United Methodist Church. This split will be eliminated with local redistricting, so it would be temporary, and this would affect 82 individuals. And then the final split precinct that was requested is Precinct 503 in Bedford County. That's I apologize if I pronounce this wrong, Sedalia Center, I believe, Sedalia Center. That precinct will be eliminated with local redistricting as well, that split, and only 29 individuals would be impacted by that split. For split precincts, the department does not recommend a particular motion. Instead, we have a number of motions that the state board may move. 1 is to approve the precinct waiver, 2 is to deny the split precinct waiver, or 3 is to defer review of the split precinct waiver request for a later meeting. So on that note, I will hand this over to the state board to entertain one of those motions. Thank you.
Okay, do the members have any comments or questions of Mr. Davenport? Does any member of the public wish to be heard on this item?
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I would just raise the split precinct that has 2 members in it, I think raises some issues about one secret ballot. I think it would require a little bit, because it's 2 members and 2 households
I
in a
believe
precinct.
I believe it's 1 household with 2 members, in fact, so that's a valid concern.
Okay, so
I wanted to raise that particular issue to make the board aware that I have a legal concern with that. And,
okay, is there any action that we should take as a result of your concerns?
I think we could probably discuss more detailed legal advice in executive session later, but I did think I should raise that concern if you want. I don't have any legal concerns with the others, but since one of the recommendations was not to adopt them today, that would be up to the board, of course. But
I'm sorry.
since one of the recommendations was not to adopt everything today, that would be up to the board. I would have felt remiss not at least raising that issue about such a small split.
All right. Can Mr. Davenport or can somebody say, is there any detriment to postponing consideration of this item until next month's meeting?
I don't believe there would be for postponing till next month. I will say if there was a representative from Bedford, they'd probably be better able to speak if that's going to create any logistical problems for them with administering upcoming elections. But from elect's point of view, no, there's not any issue with deferring that 1 split for 1 month. And that was precinct 104 if you wanted to entertain separate motions.
Parliamentary inquiry. Would it be acceptable to approve the other 2 and defer that one until next month?
I believe we could do that. All right, that's what we'll do then, and receive the advice of counsel in closed session in regard to the privacy issue. Motion to approve.
I move that we approve precinct 303 and precinct 503 as a split precinct and defer 104.
Okay, is there a second?
Second, add it to the closed session agenda.
Is there any further discussion? If not, Secretary will call the roll.
Okay. Chairman Brink,
Aye.
Vice Chair O'Bannon, Ms. Chang, Delegate Merrick's,
Aye.
Secretary Alvis Long is aye.
All right, the motion is approved 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, and welcome to the new board member.
All right. Our next item of business is an overview of the process by which electronic poll books are certified. Following last month's meeting, I asked for this presentation because I thought that both the members and the public would benefit from an explanation of the steps that are involved in the certification process. Ms. Hoyt Stewart?
Hi. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome aboard, hyphenated. Okay, I'm into that. Yeah, last meeting brought up a couple questions, and so we put together a little presentation on public standards and certification overview. I can't see, okay, just a minute. Is she ready? Just a minute, she's pulling up the PowerPoint.
There we go.
Go, okay. And the next page. Next. Yeah. I will just, okay, yes, let's just start. The Commonwealth has over 8,000 electronic poll books in our Commonwealth. We have 3 certified vendors at this point, DemTech, which is Centerpoint, we have No Ink, and we have Robust Elections. We're one of the 13 states in the country that require certified electronic poll books. The other states don't require certification at all. In November of 2019, we created new standards for the electronic poll books. The original one was done in 2015. We upgraded it in 2019 with the idea of early voting and connectivity, and the whole importance of cybersecurity and security of those connectivities on those poll books was important, and that's why we wrote it into the new standards. All the vendors will be certified to the new standards and out in the Commonwealth by July of 2022. We did last year make that one exception, and that's why we have to say it's 2022, but everybody else has been updated before that. Vendors can request a de minimis change to their certification. Now that's a minor change. That doesn't impact the process or how it functions at all. It's a very minor change, has to be taken through the VISTL and approved by the VISTL and then provided to us. And then that's more of an executive change versus the certification. The next slide. The process here is the vendor requests the certification first. Everything starts with the certification. Then we have a preliminary review of what their information is, and then they submit us a check. We don't do anything without a check to pay all the costs. They give us the state technical data package. They give us all their financials, their corporate, all that information, because we want to make sure that the company is a solid and secure company and someone's not going to buy their product and then disappear the next year. Then we contract with the VISTL, the Voting Systems Testing Laboratory. They're certified and accredited by the EAC. There's only 2 VISTLs, and we have SLI as our VISTL. They come on site and we go through the whole certification and make sure all the standards are met or not met, and we know which ones aren't and if there's any exceptions. Then we go to an on-site testing with a mock election at a locality. So the localities get a view and a hands-on to see if they approve of it and they think it's a good product. Then we do that. Then it comes to you guys for approval, guys and girls, sorry. The next one, the next slide. And this is basically what I just said, which is the vendor applies for a certification. That certification goes through all their software, their firmware, their hardware, and all their technical data package is reviewed and their corporate information. And they submit all their paperwork, they pay their fees, and then we do a preliminary review. And if they pass, then we take them to the next step. Okay, last meeting, we asked about the next slide of what's the Voting System Testing Laboratory. The Voting System Testing Laboratory are federally accredited, okay? They're independent. They have to pass all the tests from the EAC. They evaluate voting systems and software to determine if they provide their functionality, accessibility, and security capabilities of all these systems. Like I said, there are 2 in the United States, and Pro BMV and SLI. The EAC, the Election Assistance Commission, is responsible for all the guidelines and the accreditation, and we can't use someone who's not certified. And so they have been certified. Next slide. The VISTL, when they come into testing, we do it on site, they confirm the testing, and just so everybody knows, there's 94 different testing scenarios that we go through for electronic poll books, which is a lot. We test every variable and confirm it. The next slide, sorry. Just some of these are, for example, the electronic poll book is not required to operate the voting systems, okay? That's one of the things we test by. It cannot connect to a voting system. They must be networkable, which means they connect to each other. They must synchronize in site. Like if you've got 3 poll books, they all have to synchronize. Pull one out, it goes off, it comes back in, has to synchronize again, okay? They must report statistics on voter check-in process, at least provide the data for that report to be able to know. So we can track, if we wanted to track how long it takes to check in, how long does a voter, stand there. And this is really good, especially for curbside voting. So how long the curbside voting takes and all this. So these are just statistics. They have to have this. They have to have a battery status indicator and a peripheral indicator, because we want them to be able to see that if that printer is connected or not, or if their battery's down to 20% and you're getting ready to die, we want them to be alerted. Oh, you got a problem here. We also have passwords, and the passwords have to be NIST certified. The password and that capability, okay? Each locality does different things with their passwords. We don't tell them what to do with their passwords. Each locality is responsible. But also they have to have best practices for internet connectivity, for wireless and all those cloud services. And they must upgrade to a modern operating system and be kept up to date. We had an issue with that before, and that resolves that issue of trying to keep like for example, we had systems out there that were on different kinds of different versions of firmware, which we've eliminated now. We all have the same operating system and Windows 10. Okay, the comments from last time were, one of the things on No Ink, and it's going to be on this one, next one too, is that unable to mask or unmask passwords. This is a failure of TOO 61. And No Ink uses an Apple product. An Apple product doesn't allow you to unmask the password. The concern was the passwords were unmasked, and they aren't unmasked, they're masked. We, as election officials, wanted to have an option there, but it's an exception. Most places don't have unmasked, but the thinking was if some election poll workers may need to see what they're typing in, and so that's why we put that in as an option. So, but again, though, it was still approved with, masking is okay. It's unmasking. You can't have it unmasked all the time, because then people could look over your shoulder and see what your password is, and that's not good. The other comment was that you can't connect to a voting system. And there's no way to test for that in the electronic poll book environment unless you have a voting system along with that poll book. So you can't really test that assertion in a testing environment with just a poll book. And that's why that comment was made. This one should make sure that the local GRs and electoral board members are actually doing the kind of locality practices that are needed on the network connectivity. We, on early voting, one of the critical in the regulations we wrote in there, how they have to proceed, and if you'll go to the next slide, they have to submit a checklist. And their IT person, and usually the GR, but usually the IT person goes out on site to each of their sites and confirms the connectivity, confirms the security, that the IP address has been whitelisted, everything is secure. They then fill this checklist out, then it's submitted into our secure software and recorded there, and then that satellite is approved once that's been signed off and confirmed that everything is connected properly. That the software, the connectivity software, and the next slide is, it monitors the information. It tries to detect any attacks, indicators of potential attacks. It's required to do that, and now how it's set up in your Mariaki and all that. It identifies any unauthorized use, anybody trying to attempt an unauthorized use. We don't have any. We did have an incident last year where we had a poll worker was trying to break into a electronic poll book, connected electronic poll book, and they failed. They did 4 attempts. They failed 4 times. So it proved that the connectivity was secure. All this equipment is like, different vendors use different systems. Some use Verizon's MiFi, some use the cloud, some use the Meraki. It's all secured systems that are being used. Find out what discrepancies and vulnerabilities are identified in the most recent assessment of the poll book. All poll book vendors are required to do penetration testing report that to us. Was there anything issue there or anything, and also the source code review. And the source code review report tells if, for example, if there's anything in their source code that would be, very vulnerable. And we have those reports before we even consider approving a electronic poll book. I do want to say this, and I think most people, maybe Susan doesn't know me because she just started, but we try to listen to everybody. We try to hear them and we understand where they're coming from. And we're more than willing to respond to any of their comments or questions anytime, and we will prioritize a response, but after the meeting. So if anybody has any comments or questions, please submit them, and we will get them back, a response back to you.
And thank you, Ms. Hoyt-Stewart. Do the members have any comments or questions of Ms. Hoyt-Stewart?
Helpful, Karen, I appreciate it. EAC is Elections
Assistance Commission.
And where in federal government is that housed?
Got to be in Washington DC somewhere, but I don't know the building. I don't know but they were started,
Election, what branch of federal government?
It's an executive. It was started when Bush, Gore, it was started in that time frame before the HAVA. Mhm.
Right.
Yep. And they were created to create guidelines. Okay, they're still called Voluntary Voting System Guidelines, and that was in 2005, when they created their first 1.0. And now that last February, they just passed the preliminary 2.0, and they're working out that, but they have to create the test assertions, they have to create all that in order to even start going forward with that kind of certification.
Additional comments or questions? Okay, does any member of the public wish to be heard? I'm sorry? No public comment? All right. In that event, thank you for your presentation. Ms.
Okay,
Stewart.
well, I hope it helped. I hope it helped.
All right. Don't go far.
Okay.
The next item on the agenda is certification of election system and software Express Poll 7.2.4.0. Ms. Hoyt-Stewart?
Right. Election Systems and Software initiated the certification back in March. We have been working on this with Election Systems Software. If you remember last year, we came before the board and asked for an extension in August, I believe, or September was, because Hampton City or Hampton County, I don't know which one it is, they were using those poll books, and the old version, and ES&S was going to bring in their version earlier to be certified, and they just couldn't bring it in to certify in time for them to be able to use it. So this is their newest version. It's a wholly different format than the old poll books. But they brought it in. We've done all their technical review. We've looked at their corporate information. We've got their penetration testing, their source code review. Everything is fine. Then we brought in, of course, they submitted as a check, and we brought in the Vistal, and we did the testing from May 9th through the 11th, right down on Bank Street. Everything was successful, except there's exceptions. And we took it to Richmond City, who did a mock election, and they provided that letters provided in there, and it was successful there. The exceptions are their poll book is unable to search by address fields, district and address fields. This is, in our opinion, is not a game stopper because they basically search by last name, first name, year of birth, and voter ID. And they can swipe a driver's license and bring it up that way, but they just, at this point, now they've made a commitment to add that search table later in next release. So we don't look at that as a hard stop. We don't look at that way. The other thing is their standards we went back and forth with the Vistal on this, okay? The standards say that they have to be NIST 853 compliant. And the NIST standards, 853 compliant, they map up to CIS level 2 standards. And so what ES&S does is they have CIS level 2 standards instead of NIST 853. It's the same security standard. It actually offers a little bit more options in the sense that the administrator manages the variables and applies the security, whereas the other one you eliminate. So it's a different way of setting up your standards, but it's the same, it's an equal standard. The other one would be ISO 27000 series standards. They're all sort of matched the same. So those are the exceptions that I have down at the bottom. But as far as functionality and Richmond City, their electoral board members and their staff, they tested it thoroughly and approved it.
That complete your presentation?
Yes.
Okay. I have one very small question. What does CIS stand for?
Let me see, CIS, CIS is Computer Information Security, and they're out of CISA. They're a nonprofit under CISA, which is Computer System Authority Agency, and since CIS is under them. And then CIS provides a lot of help for the localities with the ISAC, election infrastructure ISAC. They provide a lot of tools, like vulnerability tools, like this SysCat Pro. And then they also have a tool for malicious domains, which are offered free to the localities. So they're very active in the security world. And they have their standards. Their standards are like 12 standards versus the NIST standards, which are 21 standards with 441 controls.
So there are two sets. Are there more than two?
Yes.
You have
there's
CIS,
two.
NIST, who else?
There's ISO, and then there's also the NCSR, and then there's EIAT. And so we're actually, one of the localities working on a grant trying to get us all mapped up so that we can say, for example, if you meet this standard, then you met this standard, you met this standard. So that when the localities have to fill out these forms, the NCSR or the EIAT, they can say, oh yeah, we met that one, we met that one, we met that one, we're good.
Okay. And you said that the CIS standard is in some respects more stringent than the NIST standard?
It's equal to, it's the framework. It's equal to the data frame, the standards. It's the security standard and what level it is. It's level 2, it's a hardening level. Yeah.
Thank you.
26 letters in the alphabet.
And all of them are in use. All right. Are there additional comments or questions from the members? Does any member of the public wish to be heard on this item? No public comment. In that event, I will entertain a motion that the standard be certified.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board certify the use of election systems and software Express Poll 7.2.4.0 electronic poll book and elections in the Commonwealth of Virginia pursuant to the Virginia State Certification of Electronic Poll Books Requirements and Procedures.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that the board certify the use of this poll book. The secretary will call the roll.
Chairman Brink,
Aye.
Vice Chairman O'Bannon,
Aye.
Ms. Chang, Delegate Merrick's.
Aye.
Secretary Alvis Long, aye.
The motion passes 5-0. Thank you
Okay.
very much, Ms.
Thank
Hoy
you.
Stewart. All right, our final item of business is an update from the board's advisory review work group from the work group's chair, Lisa Cotin-Gerchik. Ms. Gerchik, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Brink. Members of the board, good afternoon. And thank you for this opportunity to tell you about the final report that the Advisory Review Work Group approved unanimously at its April 25th meeting. Next slide, please. The State Board of Elections established the Advisory Review Work Group by resolution in October 2019. The work group has 13 members appointed by the board, 3 representatives of the Virginia Registrars Association, 3 from the Virginia Electoral Board Association, 1 each from the Virginia Municipal League and the Virginia Association of Counties, and 5 citizen members. When the work group first convened, the board assigned a project to develop benchmarks to measure a successful election. Next slide, please. As explained in the status report on August 3rd of last year, the work group's first step was to come up with a definition of a successful election. We arrived at this definition. A well-run election is accessible, efficient, transparent, secure, and accurate so that the public can be confident in the election results. You will note, however, that we modified the scope of the project to measure a well-run rather than a successful election. We did that because while we looked to draw the conclusion that the election was successful, what we really mean is that it was conducted without any significant flaws. A major theme in our deliberations has been to stick to objectively demonstrable facts and to avoid subjective conclusions and opinions. Next slide, please. After defining a well-run election, the work group focused on the process. The first step was to identify the elements of an election. In reality, elections consist of hundreds or even thousands of discrete actions, often reflecting thousands of decisions at every level and in every direction. No set of benchmarks could possibly measure all of them, and they would not be useful even if you could. Early in the process, the chairman and the former commissioner described the assignment as examining an election from a few thousand feet, not 30,000 feet and not at ground level. They also envisioned looking at the election from the standpoint of its participants. Picture, if you will, an NFL game with 5 different camera angles. Reviewing the plays through those lenses, you can see what's really happening during the game and what the players are doing. As part of its work, the work group would have to identify the participants that can show us whether or not an election was well run. Finally, the work group would have to consider the appropriate ways to measure a well-run election. Next slide, please. Let's talk a moment about the players involved in an election. We begin with the responsible election officials at both state and local levels. That covers ELECT, that is the Department of Elections, the registrars and their staffs, and the local electoral boards. By extension, it also includes the officers of election, in other words, the workers at the precinct polling places and early voting sites. These are the providers. We must also consider those we serve, the voters. This brings us to the current state. The work group has completed phase 1. Next slide, please. That's slide 7. To proceed efficiently in a second phase, the work group already has a proposed framework for choosing appropriate measures for those 24 elements and certain sub-elements. The framework is found in a working document that ELECT's former consultant had prepared last year. To give some examples, we might want to know the total voter turnout in an election. Was it high or low? And compared to what? We might want to know the percentage of registered voters who voted. In some cases, we might want to compare Virginia's data to national norms. For instance, we can agree that waiting hours in line is unacceptable. But how long is too long? How long is okay? The Presidential Commission on Election Administration issued a report in 2014 that states that no voter should have to wait more than 30 minutes to be able to vote. Virginia's wait times in its localities can be compared to this norm. Even while determining what are the right measures, the work group could research what information is already available. Quite a bit of data are compiled and analyzed in the department's periodic post-election report. Then we could figure out what other data relevant to the elements election officials routinely gather and have ready to aggregate and analyze. One word about the post-election report. It is a great tool, but it is the department's report from its perspective. In contrast, the work group's task is to assess the election from multiple standpoints. Next slide, please. Not all data necessary to make a comprehensive review are currently available. We would probably need surveys to learn from officers of election what worked well and what didn't, when they felt well equipped to handle situations, when they thought they could have used more training. Voters could also be surveyed. Survey questions would be geared toward their individual experiences, such as how long they waited in line, how efficiently the election officers managed the polling place, or whether the absentee ballot they requested arrived promptly in the mail and they could track its return. We can ascertain the resources we might be able to tap into to develop and conduct such surveys. In addition, we have received feedback pointing out that it is unlikely that the work group, or anyone else for that matter, could measure every single element identified in our report without significant financial and human resources. Completing a study that comprehensive would also take a really long time, too long to be useful. To achieve that goal, we would have to set priorities and see what we could reasonably accomplish within a set time frame. Next slide, please. The members of the work group request the board's authorization to proceed to the next phase of this project and bring it to fruition. Here in this slide, we recap the initial steps we would take. Developing measures would involve reviewing the framework we already have and devising surveys. The work group can find the data available, some of which is already in use and some of which must be compiled. We would focus on a multifaceted approach involving all the key groups of actors and prioritize the key elements. In preparing the final report, every member of the work group had ideas and suggestions. Everyone helped refine the wording, and we all discussed the implications. It was a collaborative effort. I would like to recognize them. Those in the room today might show us you're here. The work group members are Tammy Johnson-Beard, Katie Boyle, Barry Condry, Jason Corwin, Kim Cummings, Kate Hanley, Walter Latham, Tram Nguyen, Allison Robbins, Joanne Spiden, and Barbara Tabb. Thanks to everyone. And thank you, members of the board. I will be pleased to answer questions.
Thank you, Ms. Gerchik. I really want to thank both you and the members of the work group for the tremendous job that you've done in compiling phase one. It sets out the parameters of what a successful election or a well-run election is, and provides a roadmap for where the work group hopefully will go in phase two. I think I've shared with you one concern that I have, which is just the sheer number of data points and elements that you're looking at, that your work has compiled so far, and the need to scope down on on those elements so that the process of identification and aggregation and tabulation will be something that'll be manageable and will produce useful results. So other than that, again, thank you very much for what you've done so far.
Thank you.
Do other members of the board have any questions, comments?
Thank you.
Does any member of the public wish to be heard on this item? All right. And then again, thank you again, Ms. Gerchik. All right, that concludes our agenda items. We will now entertain public comment on items that are not on today's agenda. Do we have a sign-up sheet or other means of knowing who in the public wishes to comment?
First up, Chris Page.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm going to try to be quick. I'm not trying to be rude. I apologize. My name is Christopher Page. I'm the former secretary of the Nottoway County Electoral Board. My term ended on December 31st. Early last year, I sued the Nottoway County Electoral Board over FOIA issues. And while I will say that the board was inexperienced early last year, I will also concede that the previous registrar and her most loyal followers did not make it easy on the board at that time either. There seemed to be zero intention from certain people, including the registrar, of working with the board to achieve the business of the people, and an almost 100% intention to disrupt and misinform new board members. Speaking of information, last month, several people, including the new secretary of the electoral board, spoke to you and made allegations not against only the current board, but also against the previous board, which I served on. While I fully support the right of each citizen to bring forth their grievances to the government, I am here to tell you that the issues brought forth at your last meeting were presented in a way to cause shock, create public outrage, and they were specifically designed to cause this board to act. The information was twisted in a way to fit a narrative and to provide only a fraction of the facts, if any facts at all. Some information was provided was simply untruthful. Yes, you were lied to at times. One of those times you were told that the previous registrar was removed from office without cause. That was a lie. You were told that the integrity of Nottoway County elections is non-existent, but Nottoway had an air-free election in November with very high turnout and not one complaint to the state or to this board of how the election was operated. You were told that documents were being shredded daily. However, not once did anyone allege that a document outside the normal retention schedule had been shredded. Not once did a person claim that they sought to inspect or copy a document that was unable to be inspected or copied. I provided each of you with a detailed response to these allegations, and I hope that you've had time to review them. I don't have enough time to speak on them today, and I apologize for that. However, I do support an investigation by the Attorney General's office on this matter. I hope that this investigation will also include matters that the Electoral Board itself, mid to late last year, referred to the Nottoway County Commonwealth Attorney's Office, who in turn referred the matters to the Bureau of Criminal Investigations. These matters include documents and multiple allegations made by the board or its members against the previous registrar, who now works for another county, and a former officer of election. I ask today that this board vote and ask the Attorney General's office to expand its scope of the investigation to include those matters as well. I also would like the board to ask the Attorney General to investigate why some of the same folks who came here last month, including the new secretary, have been attending the Sussex County Electoral Board meetings and causing turmoil for those board members, and whether there's a connection between the matters in Sussex County and Nottoway County. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Page. Are there additional individuals who wish to be heard?
Next, I have May Tucker.
Welcome, Ms. Tucker.
Thank you. Good afternoon, honorable board members. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is May Tucker. I am vice chair of the Nottaway Electoral Board, but I do not come in that capacity. I come as a citizen of the Commonwealth of Virginia. I have not been approved by the board to be here. I am on my own to address allegations that were made at your April the 13th meeting. I want to thank you first and foremost for turning everything that concerns the Nottaway Electoral Board over to the Attorney General's office. So petty for people to think that you all can do this. So thank you so much for that. The allegations brought to you last month were presented by a very small group of Republicans from Nottaway County. Now, Nottaway County is a very small little county, but I'm sure anybody with any common sense knows it's more than 13 Republicans in Nottaway, Virginia. And it's the same 13 that harass the Electoral Board of Nottaway every month. Two concerns that I am mostly concerned with, though, are the allegations made by Barbara Tabb and Clarabelle Wheeler. At my first meeting upon becoming a member of the Electoral Board, I met Barbara Tabb. She came forward, shook my hand and smiled, sat down and immediately told, not knowing she was talking to the chairman of the Democratic Committee, she doesn't know what she's doing, she's not qualified. I didn't know that a handshake could do that much mental telepathy, but this is what happened. That was the first and last meeting from April of 2021 up until today that I saw Barbara Tabb. Next, Clarabelle Wheeler. I think she may have been at one of the earlier meetings. I don't know her, but I'm thinking I heard that name at one of our earlier meetings. I haven't seen her since. I want to know, how do they know so much about what's going on in Nottaway County, what's going on with the Nottaway Electoral Board if they aren't there? You know, it just doesn't happen. If they have facts that they know of and not hearsay, then they should bring them forward to you. Unfortunately, when accusations are made against public entities, as you all know, they are unable to speak in their defense due to it being a possible legal matter or due to an active investigation. This means that only one side of the story is provided. One side can get up and say whatever they want to, but that is the price you pay for public service. I have faith that the Attorney General's office will complete an open, honest, and fair investigation, that they will interview both sides involved, question both sides involved on the evidence of all matters before making any determination. Again, I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tucker. Are there additional members of the public who wish to be heard?
Next, I have Rodney Reynolds.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Rodney Reynolds. I am the General Registrar for Nottaway County. And I do appreciate the esteemed members of this board allowing me an opportunity to speak as well. Speaking primarily to offer what I would call the other side of a conversation that you heard last month about the county's board members, as well as the operation of the current the General Registrar's office. First, I find it extremely disheartening that Secretary Reynolds would, in essence, share what I deem an interim assessment of my performance without having any such discussion with me myself prior to making it a public assessment that he shared with you. While I'm not, nor have I ever been a personnel specialist, I believe my personnel rights as an employee of the state of Virginia could possibly have been violated. But again, since I'm not a personnel specialist, I imagine we'll see how that will be addressed in the future. And since specifics of my alleged incompetence were previously provided to you, I stand here to advise you that my performance assessment, that any performance assessment, I should say, coming after only 5 months of employment in a new position for the issues that required employment were not related to the employee itself, meaning myself, could be construed as an unfair labor practice. In my 30 years of service to the United States of America's federal government in the field of financial management, the focus on fair and equal employment was a regular practice. And since the state of Virginia has itself always been a stellar member of this union of ours, I find it difficult to believe that the state's employment practices would differ that much from the union we call the United States of America. I also want to speak to a statement made concerning the registrar calling a meeting of the electoral board. I want to state that I don't believe I myself possess that authority to call a meeting. I am required to advise the board members of issues that I believe require their immediate attention. And that's what was done in regard to the subject of unmarked and marked ballots found at the current office location where I work. My staff and I, by my account, in these 5 months, have made tremendous strides in establishing a functional, efficient, and courteous work environment. We've had accomplishments like properly securing our voting equipment, extending outreach to eligible high schools, developing a comprehensive voting security plan, and overseeing the administration of a security assessment while legally and efficiently administering the use of state-appropriated funding.
Could you conclude your presentation? You can submit additional remarks.
I have some documents for you right here, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Are there additional individuals who wish to be heard?
Next, I have Sarah Allen.
Ms. Allen?
Hi, thank you. I'm Sarah Allen, the current chair of the Nottaway County Electoral Board, but I'm speaking as a private citizen on the allegations made towards the Nottaway County Electoral Board. And I would like to begin with the current Secretary, Thomas Reynolds. Secretary Reynolds stated that I and the Vice Chair refused to go into closed session to discuss pending legal action. The board voted publicly in open session and on these matters as code states. Thomas Reynolds states the board and I refused to discuss bad behavior by 2 officers of election in 2018. Please be advised, no legal action was ever taken against these persons. One of the accused was actually an electoral board member and not an election officer. The State Board of Elections was never notified about this incident. There is no documentation, and the election officer was allowed to continue serving in that capacity for at least 2 more elections. However, Thomas Reynolds feels that we did not act properly. Thomas Reynolds has only been on the board for about 3 or 4 months. However, he has found all of this information, which is untrue, and presented it to the board, State Board of Elections, as facts. Secretary Reynolds states that I and another board member protested during an election at our last electoral board meeting. He refused to answer where this protest happened, what time, and what the protest was about. There's not even a police report on record concerning this. Diana Lynn Mitchell came to the State Board of Elections April 21 and April 22nd for the same thing, saying that the Nottaway Electoral Board had not received training. However, the State Board of Elections has our training on file, because in 2021, when they came up here, it was not investigated and we had a fault against us. And we completed those trainings and turned them into you. However, she came up again in April 2022 and said the same exact claims again. Sonny Abbott, a former Nottaway Electoral Board member and Secretary of Election who resigned from both. He states that there have been 3 secretaries since him. What he failed to mention is that One was encouraged to resign by the Republican chair, which there's documentation on. Secondly, the second completed his term and was not reappointed by the Republican chair. And the third secretary is our current secretary, Thomas Reynolds. Mr. Abbott later became an officer of an election and then resigned from that position also. He talks about fairness and transparency in elections. I request that the State Board of Elections investigate why he resigned, to be transparent. And Barbara Tabbs claims she trained Nottaway County Electoral Board. However, Nottaway County Electoral Board was sued in 2021. After taking the advice received from Barbara Tabbs, she told the board not to write the minutes for the budget meeting. We listened and ended up being sued. I have the email to prove it. But yet she says this has been an ongoing disaster down there. She has not attended a Nottaway Electoral Board meeting in the last year. So from where is she getting this information? Thank you.
Thank you. Additional individuals?
Next, I have Thomas Cruz.
Mr. Cruz, welcome.
Thank you so much. Madam Commissioner and honorable members of the State Board of Elections, I want to thank you for granting me the opportunity to address you this afternoon. My name is Thomas Cruz, and I'm the chairman of the Nottaway County Democratic Committee. Due to my limited time to speak and address the board, I have written a rigorous response to each of Secretary Reynolds' inflammatory accusations. Those accusations range from the completely false to a radical mischaracterization of events. I have been involved in elections in Nottaway County since November of 2019. I've had a front row seat to everything that has transpired. I've only missed a small handful of electoral board meetings since that time, and the electoral board meets nearly every single month in Nottaway County. If the Virginia State Board of Elections is interested in knowing what has previously taken place in Nottaway County and wants to understand the context of the current events, the only way to get that is to extend the scope of the investigation and recenter it on the former Registrar of Nottaway County, Angela Stewart. Ms. Stewart was terminated in a unanimous bipartisan vote last year by the Nottaway County Electoral Board. It is widely known that the Electoral Board worked in close consultation with the Virginia Department of Elections, the Nottaway County Administrator's Office, and with the Nottaway County Attorney as they work their way through the process. The termination of a registrar, especially right before election, is a major event. I believe it would be prudent for the board to instruct the Attorney General's office to look into why she was terminated and all of the problems and conflicts that were happening prior to her termination, dating all the way back to at least 2019 in some cases. Without this context, it is next to impossible to understand the conflict and controversy in Nottaway County. It may also be prudent for this board to investigate why some of the individuals who have appeared before you to make scandalous accusations against the Electoral Board are now appearing in Sussex County to disrupt the Electoral Board meetings. Among those individuals include, to the best of my knowledge, Secretary Thomas Reynolds himself. It may also be prudent to know, once again, to the best of my knowledge, that the former registrar who was hired, at least temporarily, in Sussex County after her termination in Nottaway. I'm happy to assist the State Board in whatever way that I can to provide evidence and testimony for what I have witnessed. I believe strongly that so long as an investigation is open, fair, and transparent, that the truth will vindicate the Nottaway County Electoral Board. Thank you for allowing me to address the board this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. Do we have additional speakers?
And next, we have Angie. She's online. Let me unmute her.
Hello?
Hello.
Yes, hello. My name is Ann Gregorian, and I am an election official from the peninsula. And I have a question that I would like formal guidance on, either from elect or the State Board of Elections or both. My question is regarding the 4 forms of ID that are acceptable for voting purposes. One of them is the driver's privilege card. I did consult with my sheriff here locally, Sheriff Montgomery, and also the DMV with Richmond. Apparently the law was changed when it was passed. Originally it was supposed to have a statement on the back of these cards that said driver privilege card not valid for ID for voting or public benefit purpose. The law was changed to explicitly state that these ID cards were to be indistinguishable from a regular driver's license. These are the cards that are issued to people who are non-citizens of Virginia, among other people. So I would like some guidance when I am checking people in at the poll books and somebody presents me a form of ID that is not acceptable in the form of a privilege card. How am I supposed to distinguish that from a driver's license and perform my duties as an election official? So that's my request to either elect or the board to give me guidance. If somebody presents me with a driver privilege card, how am I to distinguish that as from a driver's license, which is an acceptable form of ID? Thank you very much for taking my concern.
Thank you. If you could do us the favor of putting your concerns down in writing and forwarding them to the department, we'll be glad to look at them and get back to you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we have Diana Lynn. She's online as well.
Thank you. My name is Diana Lynn Wilkins Mitchell. I'm also from Nottoway County. I spoke to you last month at the board meeting. Things have continued to escalate, as you can see. The new thing is bullying tactics during the meeting. The next meeting that I went to after the State Board of Elections, we were vilified and attacked verbally by the board individually during public delegation. Some of those things included direct attacks, specifically named. I think at one point, Mr. Cruz said, you and your little cadre thought you were doing something. I believe the First Amendment rights of one of the individuals that was present was violated because he was ejected from the meeting because he refused to agree with the board. It is a whistleblower attack. How dare us come forward and ask for help? Right now, there's questions about the current budget that's requesting additional funding for food, for a secretary for the electoral board, money that the county of Nottoway has no business spending, nor can afford to spend. It continues on, and the more questions you ask, the harder it gets to get an answer, or you, again, are attacked verbally in front of everyone there. I myself have seen this happen, and I videotaped it and provided copies to everyone on this board as well as the Attorney General. In addition, I did go to the Sussex County meeting to see a similar locality and how they would handle the electoral board. And as usual, I videotaped it and was called a racial slur for being there by one of the members, was told there is no agenda for the meeting and there was no public delegation for a public meeting. Nobody is attacking anyone in Sussex, quite the opposite. I was looking for further information, as I always do, to help me, to guide me, so I would better know what to expect. And again, bad information was given. Barbara Tabb and Clarabelle Wheeler have been involved with the electoral board in Nottoway since February of 2021. So they are well aware of what is happening. Barbara Tabb herself has come to train. I would definitely think that those two people had viable information and valuable information to address any issues in Nottoway County. Right now, FOIA is being used as a weapon to hurt anyone who comes forward with any information contradictory to the board. It is terrifying in so many ways what is going on in Nottoway County. I can only beg you, the state, to send someone down to regulate what's going on in Nottoway County. There is no one locally that can do it. Only you can. And so few people really understand elect law, which makes it more confusing locally to get anyone to help.
Can you conclude your presentation, please?
All done. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Do we have additional speakers?
We have Christine Brim.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
See. Okay, great. So thank you to our new member of the board, Madam Commissioner, honorable members of the Board of Elections. I had raised some issues at the last meeting on April 13th about the no ink poll pads. and in particular on the fact that we did not have test results in those meeting materials. I did just submit today my letter of concern. I would draw the attention of the board to that, as well as the staff. It's an attempt to structure a dialogue with the public about these concerns, which extend more broadly to other electronic poll books. It's a technical memo because it looks at a number of studies of the Knowink and other electronic poll books, and it's going to be a living document, and we're sharing it with other technical experts to try and get their contributions and criticisms of the document. So as I said, it's an attempt to structure a back and forth dialogue with the office there and concerned members of the public. Our concerns are not obviously to get rid of it, are concerns about specific tests and about transparency. I just want to draw attention to 3 items. One, there is a request in the memo for the board to include in the next month's materials the full test results for both Knowink and for the Express poll that were used for the certification, just as they had previously been published in 2020, and for the poll pad, for the Knowink poll pad then, and in 2019 for ES&S EVS equipment. I think a good precedent was set then. We would like to think that you'll continue your tradition of transparency. I think it's really important to publish them. There's no secure information in there, and if there is, redact it. But we would ask for those to be published. And one of the key reasons is that they were already published in 2020. A number of issues were raised then. Those issues are specified in the memo that I sent. And so we don't know if those were resolved over the last 2 years or if new issues were raised. So I wanted to make that specific request for more transparency. I also want to address specifically the PowerPoint that was sent out last night. It's very helpful. Thank you for that briefing. I do think that, and I also addressed this in the memo around page 5, there are significant issues still in place about the ability of general registrars and their staff to comply with HB 2189. And I draw your attention to the press release that was issued by ELECT in November 18th, I believe it was, of 2021, which quoted Mr. Persico, who's been given an award, with the problems that he had identified in the inability
Can you conclude your
of local groups
presentation,
to
please?
comply. All done.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Brim. The staff received your comments just before the meeting, and as we said, we'll respond to all follow-up comments after the meeting. Thank you. Are there additional speakers?
Mr. James Knackman.
Mr. Nachman, welcome.
Yes, sir. Chairman Brink, Vice Chair O'Bannon, Dr. O'Bannon, congratulations, Madam Secretary, Madam Commissioner. Per your letter of April 18th, 2022, I'd just like to let the board know that we have complied with all of your directives, and I made sure that at a board meeting May 19th, and I asked everybody individually if they had done what you had asked them to do, and they replied in the affirmative. And I know that they have sent in, and I have sent in all of our certificates. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nachman.
Yes, sir.
And you're correct that we've received the certifications of attendance at the classes from you, from Ms. Stevens, and from Ms. Smith. And I appreciate your cooperation in providing that material.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
That we have a volunteer from the audience. Ms. Hogue?
Good
Welcome.
afternoon. I apologize for not having already signed up. I did not realize, do my homework, that the meeting had been moved, so I was scrambling up here to make it on time. So good afternoon all and welcome. Great to have a new face on the board and the commission, so thank you all very much. I'll come before you all with now what seems to be a very simple request. Last month, you all may remember that I had requested you all take a look at the costs that were associated with those 6 different reports that are available for a service fee. And I wanted just to give a copy of those reports if I could share that with your staff. And we have gotten a couple of those reports, and in looking at those data reports, some of the actual information within the data sets themselves, I had reached out and requested a sort of a data dictionary, if you will, from some of the elect staff back at the end of March of this year. And I know they have been super busy with the primaries and the redistricting, so it may, be something on the side burner, but I'm hoping that now if I can touch base with you all and reach out and ask for your assistance, what we're looking for as an example would be on the vote history list. One of the fields of information is referred to as a transaction date. And the various dates that I have seen for this past November 2021 election had transaction dates from September, October, November, and December of 2021, which I found to be very interesting because I thought the election was over back in the first part of November. So how can we have a transaction date that occurred well after that time frame? And so we really are looking for a robust sort of description, if we could please, of what the data in those fields actually represent. Some of them are obviously are self-explanatory, but transaction date being a very good example, transaction type, add versus modify. Again, don't know what they actually mean when they are adding a transaction type or modifying a transaction type. Again, just don't know. And the data that has been purchased and that we're reviewing, it's not as helpful as it could otherwise be if we actually had a better vetting and understanding of what the data is supposed to represent. And this is just one example, but I come before you asking for that request to see if perhaps your staff at some point would be able to take a look at that and maybe share that information, because I dare say others that have requested the very same, those reports would find it to be very useful as well. So otherwise, it's nice to have, but what do you do with it, right? So we would request that. Thank you very much. Simple request now, right? Relatively speaking.
Thank you, Ms. Hogue.
Thank you, sir. Have a good one.
Are there additional speakers? All right. So that concludes public comment. I will entertain a motion that the board go into closed session.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-37, 11A7, I move that the board go into closed session for the purpose of discussing pending and threatened litigation in accordance with Section 2.2-3712F. Susan Beals, Commissioner of Elections, and Joshua Leaf of the Office of the Attorney General will attend the closed session because their presence will reasonably aid the board in its consideration of the subject of the meeting.
Is there a second?
Seconded, but I would request it be amended to include the single item left over from that.
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, can we also amend it to include Danny Davenport of our policy staff?
I was thinking the same thing. All right, so in addition to Commissioner Beals and Mr. Leaf of OAG, Mr. Davenport will attend the meeting because their presence will reasonably aid the board in its consideration of the subject of the meeting. It's been moved and seconded that we go into closed session. Will the secretary call the roll, please?
Chairman Brink.
Aye.
Vice Chairman O'Bannon. Ms. Chang. Delegate Merricks.
Aye.
Secretary Elvis Long, aye.
The motion passes 5-0. So thank you all. I'll entertain a motion to reconvene in open session.
Mr. Chairman, I move to reconvene the meeting in open session and take a roll call certifying that to the best of each member's knowledge, only such public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under this chapter and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard or discussed by the State Board of Elections.
Is there a second to that motion? It's been moved and seconded. Will the secretary call the roll?
Chairman Brink,
I vote aye.
Vice Chairman O'Bannon, Ms. Chang, Delegate Merrick's,
Aye.
Secretary Elvis Long, aye.
The motion passes 5-0. Is there any additional business to come before the board?
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion.
Gentleman will state it.
I move that the board approve Bedford County's request for split precinct number 104 as discussed earlier in the meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the board approve Bedford County's petition for a waiver for a split precinct. The secretary will call the roll.
Chairman Brink,
I vote aye.
Vice Chairman O'Bannon, Ms. Chang, Delegate Merrick's,
Aye.
Secretary Elvis Long, aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Is there any additional business to come before the board? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Motion passes. Thank you very much. See you July 5.